I'll call the meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This is an open meeting of the Seward, Nebraska governing body. The City of Seward abides by the Nebraska Open Meetings Act in conducting business. A copy of the Nebraska Open Meetings Act is displayed on the north wall of this meeting room facility as required. Disclosure of meeting recording processes is posted in the meeting room. A participant sign-in sheet is available for use by any citizen addressing the council. Presenters shall approach the podium, state their name and address for the clerk's record, and are asked to limit remarks to 5 minutes. All remarks shall be directed to the mayor, who shall determine by whom any appropriate response shall be made. The City of Seward reserves the right to adjust the order of items on this agenda if necessary, and may elect to take action on any of the items listed. Please call the roll.
Alyssa Hendricks. Here. Matt Streisand.
Here.
Carl Miller.
Here.
Jessica Coltman. Here. Sid Cantor.
Here.
All right. Our first item this evening is a commendation for heroic actions taken at July 20, 2022 house fire. So I'd like to just read a synopsis of what happened that day. I am excited about this honor to recognize some incredible first responders tonight. On July 29, 2022 at approximately 2:40 p.m., Seward Police Department, the Seward Volunteer Fire Department, and the Seward County Sheriff's Office responded to a house fire at 428 North 3rd Street. The house had 5 different apartments inside of it, so the difficult task of determining if anyone was inside was the number one priority. After making contact with a number of residents, it was reported by them that no one else remained in the structure. At this time, the first few responders on scene began to assess the fire and walk further around the large residential building. It was then discovered that a male subject was trapped by the fire hanging from a rear window on the north side of the house. The window had been broken out, but the male subject was unable to exit by himself due to already suffering burns from inside. Additionally, the window was located approximately 6 feet off the ground. Chief Brian Peters, Assistant Fire Chief Dan Brom, and Sheriff's Deputy and former city officer Johnny May were able to lift the man out of the window and bring him to safety. He was later transported to the hospital in Lincoln, where he was treated for his burns and ultimately released. In a post-fire investigation follow-up interview with the male subject, he specifically noted how grateful he was for all of the life-saving efforts and noted that he would have been unable to get out of the rear apartment without the quick actions of 3 aforementioned first responders. The brave efforts of these first responders ultimately saved him from certain death. In light of these brave life-saving efforts and exercising quick thinking and grace under pressure, it is my great pleasure on behalf of the City of Seward and the many citizens of Seward to award a certificate of merit and commendation to Chief Brian Peters, Assistant Fire Chief Dan Brom, and Sheriff's Deputy Johnny May. So if you come forward, I'd like to present you with these certificates of merit. Here, this is fine. Derek, did you want to get a picture? All right, so Daniel Brom, you're first up. Congratulations. Brian Peters. Jonathan May. I don't know, Chief Peters or Sheriff Vance, would you like to say a few words at all?
Yes, sir. I was also contacted by Mr. Butcher, and I have a letter of commendation for all 3 of the men. I just want to say I'm proud to work with men like this that take their public service seriously and putting their lives in danger as well as the other gentlemen. So I want to give each one of them a letter of commendation from the Sheriff's Office.
Congratulations, sir.
Yeah, and Chief Kimsey, did you want to say anything on behalf of the fire department? I know you love being put on the spot.
Yeah, no kidding. Good job, you guys.
And again, on behalf of the city, I just want to say thank you for your quick response that day, and I know having the volunteer fire department and our police department as well as the sheriff's department all working together, and all the other departments that were able to respond that day. It does take a group effort, especially when you're talking about structure fire, because you just don't know how that's going to end up, especially in a building that's as unique as that particular apartment building with so many units. So again, thank everyone for your service and your commitment, and we really do appreciate your hard work. Thank you.
And your plaques were ordered, but they couldn't get them done in time. They'll contact you when they come in.
Same thing on behalf of the city, the award for merit that you see on your certificate, you'll also receive that ribbon for your uniforms. And so we'll have those for you as well. I just want to say thank you to Captain Hammond, Sheriff Vance, Chief Kimsey. I consulted with them along with the mayor in recommending these awards, and they recommended it as well. I was on scene, as many of the first responders in this room were, shortly after the call came out, but right after they had removed the male subject from the window. I personally got to view the police video that showed the activity as it happened. It's a scary scene, and it really, I think in the discussions with the gentleman that ultimately who your life you saved, he could not relay enough how thankful he was for the grace under pressure that you guys took to get him out of there. He had severe burns, you guys know that, and you activated into exactly what this community asks of you, and what you've volunteered or what you've signed up to do, and that is so commendable, and that's the reason that we're here tonight. If anybody didn't know, they didn't know unless somebody leaked it to them. It was a surprise to them, but on behalf of, again, on the City of Seward, City Administration, thank you guys so much.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it. And you're welcome to stay for the next hour and a half if you like, but if you have more pressing matters, I understand. So.
I tried to con Dan into coming to this because I knew we had some other fire items. I'm like, Dan's coming, we're good. And then he wasn't coming. I was like, somebody go get Dan.
Yep.
So,
Thank you.
thank you again, Dan.
So with that, we'll move on to our consent agenda. We have 6 items on this evening's consent agenda for your consideration.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please register your votes. Please display the votes. We need to, I'm missing. Yeah, thank you. Yes. Go ahead.
Okay. Those in favor, Camprith, Colcherman, Miller, Streisand, Hendricks.
All right. Our first public hearing this evening is the amendment to the City of Seward Unified Land Development Ordinance, ULDO. Jim, there you are, hide around the corner.
Hi,
Welcome.
thank you. Good evening, council. First of 4 times you'll be hearing from me tonight. So, originally this was brought before the council as a definition change for pet services. Once we delved into this, we realized it was gonna require a little bit more research, and we were gonna have to develop a special use for the dog daycare center. So what we did, staff got together, we developed 8 criteria for the new use based on information provided to us by Scott Dinslage, the Alps Bark Park, and by the folks of the city of Gretna in referencing their ordinance and explaining their ordinance to us. The use will require a site review and a special permit, or a special use permit. The only thing that really came up in planning commission about this were questions about the difference, what's the difference between a kennel and a dog daycare? And the definition, a kennel allows dogs outdoors any time of the day. They're in a kennel, they're unsupervised, and they're outdoors. A dog daycare only allows these dogs outdoors during daylight hours and under direct supervision of a staff, some kind of employee. There was also a question about the hours. Why did we set dawn to dusk instead of 8 to 5 or something like that? Well, there was a concern about daylight savings time, and if it got dark, or if we set it up till 9 o'clock, for instance, it's dark, how are they gonna supervise these dogs? Now we're gonna put lights up, now we're opening it up for the potential that we could go all night long with dogs outside, and we didn't wanna see that. So we left it at dusk to dawn. I'm sorry, dawn to dusk. After all that, it was recommended 7-1 by the planning commission that we allow the dog daycare park ordinance.
Any questions or comments for Tim? It is a public hearing, so I'll go ahead and open up the public comment portion of the public hearing. Does anyone from the public wish to comment on item number 1? If so, please come forward at this time. And please state your name and your address for the clerk's record.
My name is Kim McCord Fisher. I live at 232 North 5th Street here in Seward. And our house is directly to the east of the Alps Bark Park. I've talked to Scott on several times, being pretty much his closest neighbor, about his plans when he was first starting out planning the Bark Park. And we've supported him 100%. That building was looking run down, and we were afraid it was just gonna be an eyesore. He's really made the place look nice, and we were somewhat concerned having dogs in and out, but it's something that we've never, we don't hear it. He talked about expanding out to have some time outside during his business hours. And again, we don't see that that's gonna be a problem, even with as close as we are to downtown, just because how the area is laid out, I don't see that it's gonna be an issue. We're really glad that he's able to expand his business to include this. And we've been to the city planning meetings and spoke my thoughts on it. So I just wanted to stand up and say again that we really appreciate what Scott Dinslage does, and that we would really like to see this expansion for his business a good cause for Seward.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to comment on this item? Please come forward at this time. Seeing no, is that Jonathan? Barely got in.
You've heard me before. Jonathan Zhang, Seward County Chamber and Development Partnership. We spoke pretty extensively over the number of hearings at the Planning Commission. We think this fits well within the downtown revitalization plan for the city of Seward. We really want downtown Seward to be a destination. We think this helps do that even further. And I think you can hear from a direct neighbor that there's support there. And obviously, he's been a good steward of the business with all of his team. So we'd ask for your consideration of support for this ordinance. Thanks.
Thank you. And Tim, can you clarify then, is this, if Mr. Dinslage were to sell the business, would a new owner have to come back?
Yes,
Or
and that will
approval.
be covered in the special, if this
Okay.
ordinance is approved, then we'll cover that in the special use.
Just wanted to make sure that was my understanding. Okay, anyone else from the public wish to comment on this item? If not, I will close the public comment portion of the public hearing and return to the council for any further discussion. And it is an ordinance, so if someone would like to, you are sure welcome to
I'll introduce your ordinance.
introduce the ordinance.
Okay, just making sure.
Make me nervous. An ordinance to amend the municipal code of the city of Seward, chapter 410 zoning and subdivision, article 3.7 commercial use types, to amend article 31.5 supplemental use regulations, and to amend attachment 1 use matrix, to repeal all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict, to provide for an effective date, to provide for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form. The ordinance has been read by title and is designated as ordinance number 2022-17.
We're gonna have a problem.
Yeah. You'll explain that?
Yep. We cannot suspend the rules to read it 3 times in one night, or do it in one night. And so,
So our option would be either to continue to move forward tonight
We'll do the first reading,
and
We
do
would
the, or
just do
just
the
you want to
first
do the
reading.
first reading.
so we would stop at this point.
and we may need to discuss with, because I got calls from 2 council members that I think are ill today. And so we're down to 5. We may need to discuss having a special meeting just to clear some of these ordinances off, because we have stuff on there for budgetary purposes and stuff as well. So that might be where we end up tonight on these, but
So with that, we can move on to the next.
Resolved before October, is that what you're looking at for the other ones?
yep.
Yeah.
Because we have one for the franchise fee, I'd like to get that, if the council should will to do so, to eliminate that before October 1st, and that would be after our,
So we could theoretically though still go ahead with the first reading and just read it, or,
I just
we
did.
just did.
okay,
Yeah.
so that's all we have to do.
And we'll do that with the other ones, just so that the public hearing is taken care of, and then we can do the special meetings if necessary. Does that sound good? Okay. So with that, we'll move on to item number 2, also a public hearing. This is consideration of a special use permit for 511 Bradbury Street to allow an outdoor dog exercise area in the central business district. And just so everyone understands, so when we do the ordinances, state law requires to have 3 separate readings of the ordinance, so the public has ample opportunity to come and comment on those items. The council routinely waives that requirement so that the item can be passed the same night, but we have to have 6 of the 8 council members have to approve that waiving of that statutory rule, and that's the reason, since we don't have 6, we can't do that. So what I did was the first reading, and then we can come back with the additional 2 readings later. So it's a little bit inside baseball procedural stuff, but it's state law. So here we are. Welcome back, Tim.
All right. Special use permit, you already alluded to it. This special use permit is handled a little differently than what we traditionally do, where we assign the special use to the property. This special use would be assigned to Scott Dinsloggy as the owner of the Alps Bark Park. Should for some reason he sell or leave the Alps Bark Park, then that special use would leave with him. And the new owner, new proprietor, new manager, whatever the case may be, will come before you guys again, seeking a special use for them to operate or continue to operate the use as a doggy daycare. That was recommended, again, 7-1.
Any questions? Yes.
Tim, is this covering just the outdoor exercise area, not the whole facility, right?
Yeah, the whole facility's legal as it is, the outdoor facility,
We'll do the
yeah.
public- we'll do the
So
public.
that's what this would cover. So if the next proprietor wished to not have the outdoor part, then they'd be all right on their own, so.
Any other questions or comments from the council? This is a public hearing, so I'll go ahead and open up the public comment portion of the public hearing. Anyone from the public wish to comment on this item, please come forward at this time. One at a time. Don't rush. All right, seeing no one, I will close the public comment portion of the public hearing. This would traditionally require a simple motion, but since we weren't able to pass the ordinance, we can't do the motion because there's no ordinance in place. So with that, we'll go ahead and
I would-
take a motion to table this
I'll make a
item.
motion to table this item.
We have a motion and a second. Please register your votes. please display the votes.
Voting in favor, Camphor, Colterman, Miller, Streisand, and Hendricks.
Alright. Item number 3, also a public hearing. This is an amendment to the City of Seward Unified Land Development Ordinance, ULDO. Tim?
Alright, the basis for this ordinance was brought about in the effort to become uniform in compliance across the city on signs. And due to recent freedom of speech, Supreme Court rulings. So, this past June, as you recall, we were inundated with signs. We had them every size, every shade, said everything in every corner they could go in. So, had quite a few complaints, we pulled quite a few signs as a result.
But Tim, to just clarify, the ones you pulled were because why?
They were in violation, they were in right of ways, they were in
okay.
sight triangles.
But not due to message or
Not
content?
due to message whatsoever. We just pulled them based off of location.
Gotcha.
We didn't care what they said. Well, our sign ordinance differed. There were restrictions on what signs could say and where they could go. The Supreme Court said we could not judge what a sign said, only the type of the sign or the size of the sign. We could not even, it was split on time frame of signs. So how long we could put, say for instance, a political sign out so many days before. They were split on whether that was freedom of speech as well. But they did not make a determination on that one. So going forward, we looked at the sign ordinance in place. Staff drove around for 2 hours one sunny day and looked at the different signage around town and how it related to our current sign ordinance. Based off of that, we made some recommendations. We changed some definitions, either removed signs that really didn't pertain, that we didn't have in the area, or altered definitions accordingly. And we then looked at some of the prohibited signs that were in the sign ordinance. We removed those that did not apply to signs within the city, or that were addressed in later regulations in the sign code. We had some that were prohibited, but yet we had ordinance later that pertained on how they should be addressed. Exempt signs, we changed that to be exempt from permitting only. They're not an exempt sign based off size and zoning, so we took them out of there. As far as temporary signs, we changed some definitions on those. We did away with permitting on those as well. We looked all these temporary signs around town, even though we required a permit. I can tell you I wrote probably 2 permits in 3 years since I've been here. So people just weren't getting them. So it didn't make sense to continue with it. So all we did under the temporary is, again, we applied size limits and related them to zoning districts. So we also made changes to the sign table then to reflect electronic signs, which are real popular now, and to allow civic use for those. We made a change on the use matrix to flags in the residential districts. Previous flags were not allowed in residential unless they were American, university flag, or state of Nebraska flag. That was it. That's all that was allowed in residential. So we made a change to that. And then we defined the total amount of signage allowed in civic. We drove by several churches and schools, and they all exceeded the 50 square foot maximum signage on their property. They've got big properties, 4, 5, 6 acres in some cases, and so they had a lot of signage to catch all the corners. So we revamped that. After the signage, it was recommended 8-0 by Planning Commission with the stipulation that the sign ordinance does not take effect till after the general election, November 8th. They felt it was unfair to, between the primaries and now, the signs they had ordered for the primary, to not be able to use them for the general election. And that was their recommendation, 8-0.
Thanks, Tim.
Yep.
Any questions or comments from the council for Tim? Yes, Alyssa.
I just have 2 questions. So, in the category C, number 2, it says balloons posters. Is that okay? Is that changed?
Yes, those are temporary signs. There's a business in town that does that, two businesses actually, that do balloons and posters
Yes.
as part of a sign. They're categorized as a temporary sign,
Okay.
so they would go by that regulation.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that that was out there, if there was a question, so.
Do you have a second?
Nope, that was it.
Oh, it's okay.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments from the council? If not, at this time, I will open up the public comment portion of the public hearing. If anyone from the public wish to comment on this item, please come forward at this time. Seeing no one from the public, I will close the public comment portion of the public hearing, turn to the council for any further discussion, or if someone would like to introduce the ordinance, it can be read.
I got another question for Tim.
Yes.
Tim, on number 4, where it says signs on public property not approved by the city,
Mm-hmm.
what's in place now, and then how is this changing, if at all?
Signs, any sign was not allowed on any public property at all. So what we did is if you wanna come to us and use public property for a sign, then you have to get permission from administration to place your sign on public property.
And that's what's in place now,
No, right now,
right now?
no public property, no signs.
So is there what procedures in place for that?
They just gotta get a hold of administration and get the okay, or get a hold of us, and then we'll clear it with administration, so.
Can you give an example, like, you talking about, like, if there's a reunion at a park and someone wanted to put up a sign, like?
We had, and he will remain nameless, but a spouse of an individual that had a 40th birthday party that wished to have a sign placed out front of City Hall on public property, and due to the ordinance, we said no.
Wow, that one hit a
Is that a
little,
good enough
that one hit a little
example?
close enough. Thank you.
So as a result of the way it was written, we couldn't have a sign on she was not allowed to put a sign on public properties.
Thank God, right?
Versus the alternative of what happened?
Yeah, right?
Any other questions?
So hopefully that answers your
That
question.
was great example. Any other questions or comments, or would someone like to introduce the ordinance?
Just one other
Yes, Sid.
question, and it's probably in here, Tim, but per my conversation with Greg, the larger, like 4x8 signs, for
Mhm.
instance, like right now with the campaign going on, those in the future will not be allowed in residential areas, right?
Correct.
They'll just be in commercial and what? Just
Any of the business,
urban
CBD,
corridors
or urban corridor,
Okay.
right, any of the C, 1 or 2 designations, but
Ag,
not residential.
they're allowed in ag.
Yes, they are allowed in ag, so.
And then one more I'm sorry. So the ones that are allowed, even now, because I have a business I use out of my home.
Yes.
Temporary ones, what's the square footage that's allowed,
It depends on the zoning.
like residential?
So for residential, 6 square foot
6
maximum.
square feet max, okay.
For any temporary sign, whether it be a realty sign, construction sign,
Banner,
political sign, banner, whatever, so.
okay, thanks.
Yeah, a big part of this was just and this is common to a lot of cities with their sign ordinances, is that they would treat commercial speech differently than political speech, and that was kind of what got a lot of them questioning whether or not they could do that. And so, commercial speech, like for sale sign, for example, there's no restriction on how long you could have it up, whereas there was restriction on political signs, and you start getting into kind of a tough area when you are allowing more protections for commercial speech than you are for political speech, and so that was sort of the gist of that. But anyway, any other questions or comments? Would someone like to introduce the ordinance?
I'll introduce.
All right.
I thought we can't do ordinances, we can.
The reading.
But we can't do the reading, okay.
We
Just the
can't
reading.
really move forward, we can just introduce,
Right.
right?
And then
Yeah.
reading.
So an ordinance to amend the municipal code of the city of Seward, chapter 410, zoning and subdivision, article 35, and attachment 2, to amend sign regulations, to amend sign tables, to repeal all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict, to provide for an effective date, to provide for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form, and this is the first reading of this ordinance. So with that, we'll move on to the next item.
Do you need a motion to table it?
Well, no, because we did it on the motion, the other one just required a motion, so we had a motion to table it, but this one, ordinance, we can do the first reading. Yeah. All right, let's see here. One's on being 4 now? Okay. So next, item number 4, public hearing, consideration of a special use permit for 310 North Fifth Street to allow construction of a downtown street level residential unit. Tim?
All right, the building at, I didn't write the address down, but I believe it's 310 North Fifth, the old Commercial Federal Bank or whatever it's been, coffee house, whatever it's been over the years. The McNally's bought it in the effort to put a dance studio in there. In the interim, they need a place to live. They've sold their house in Pleasantdale, so they wish to convert a portion of the first floor of this building to residential space. We've looked through they've submitted plans, I believe they're in your packet. They meet the requirements of 50%, less than 50% of the total first floor square footage. They have rear access that is not visible or accessible from the storefront, from the street storefront. And they've met all the fire separation requirements and egress requirements for the residents, and will be forthcoming with a plan for the dance studio so that we can review that and make sure they follow with the fire requirements and egress requirements for that as well. Recommended 8-0 by Planning Commission.
Thanks, Tim. Any questions or comments from the council? Then I will open up the public comment portion of the public hearing. Does anyone from the public wish to comment on item number 4? Please come forward at this time. I will close the public comment portion of the public hearing and turn to the council for any further discussion. And to Matt's point, this is a motion, would require a simple motion, but because this isn't tied to an ordinance that we haven't passed yet, we can vote on this one. So when you are ready for that, we sure could. Any questions or comments, or, yes?
I move approval.
Wait, do you have a motion?
I'll second.
A motion by Matt?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Moved by Streisand, second by Coulterman.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, please register your votes. Please display the votes.
Voting in favor, Camprick, Colterman, Miller, Streisand, Hendricks.
All right, thanks, Tim. Under administrative items, our first item is consideration of a resolution affixing the amount of fees for rescue squad ambulance services. We have Assistant Chief Brum, did you want to take this?
Yes.
Welcome.
Dan Brum, Assistant Chief, 622 North 4th, here in Seward. We're at the point where we need to set rates for billing, which will begin October 1st. Given the city, and I don't know if you all have copies. You all have copies of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 points that we'll be charging for. Of these, I'll just go through them real quick. The ground mileage, that is a charge for if we are transporting a person and they are in the squad, not us getting to the scene, but the point that we are transporting that person from wherever they're at to whatever facility we go to. The next two, ALS, non-emergency, emergency, most likely we will never charge for those because we are a BLS unit. There is a chance that if we are in agreement with an ALS transport unit, we might be able to charge, so I'm putting a dollar amount on those, but most likely we will never charge for those. The following two, BLS non-emergency at $700 and BLS emergency at $1,000. You can see that the industry rate ranges for those two are there. These figures were calculated roughly just through discussions of smaller towns, similar towns, and I worked with Beth at One Building Solution to verify that we were in the range of communities our size. Again, ALS 2 would be more like a helicopter, and again, we won't be doing that. SCT is if we need to bring on board a doctor, a physician, a pulmonologist, someone that's intubated, and we need to transfer them from Seward to Lincoln, which has happened one time for us, but she said she's only billed for it once in the 15 years. So that's what that is there. And treatment with no transport is $125. Some locations do not charge at all for that, but we are going to.
Thank you for that. Any questions or comments from the council? And we appreciate all your work getting this put together and presented to the council. I know it can be time consuming.
A little bit.
But now it's done.
Just gotta get that email.
Now we just have to do it.
Right.
Is there any other questions or comments from the council? Would someone like to introduce the resolution?
I'll introduce the resolution.
You're good? Alright. The resolution has been introduced and is designated as resolution number 2022-27. Would anyone like to move that this resolution be passed and adopted?
So move.
Second.
Motion by Camper, second by Streisand. Please register your votes. Please display the votes.
Voting in favor, Camper, Colterman, Miller, Streisand, Hendricks.
Thanks, Dan.
I'll send that off, thanks.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Alright, item number 2, consideration of an ordinance to amend City Code 382-11.1 golf carts and City Code 382-10.2 operation of all-terrain and utility-type vehicles. Greg?
Yes, pursuant to the guidance provided by council at the last meeting, and now we can't technically pass this tonight. I did give you a draft so we can at least discuss it. I added the recommendation by Councilmember Camprith to note the flag. So we'll have a universal rule in regards to essentially the bicycle flag on all of these vehicles. And then I added in section, I believe C, what is the new C? This is, might actually be D on this one. Except for crossing, golf cart or low-speed vehicle, and only those two, not ATVs or UTVs, may not be driven on Highway 34, Main Street, so we note both of these, or Highway 15, 6th Street, nor shall a golf cart or low-speed vehicle be driven on the roadways of Pinewood, East Pinewood, Hillcrest, East Hillcrest, North Columbia, or Waverly Road. If that list needs to be adjusted, we felt that was the most appropriate, but we can discuss that. And then we ran into the issue of if you can't drive on those, we don't really have a particular issue with people on those roadways leaving their facility and then driving down them. So I noted, except to leave or enter a specific location on said roadways, those roadways being non-highway roadways. But I just let rest to you.
So, in other words, if you live on Pinewood and you're not allowed to go on Pinewood, you can at least access Pinewood to get to a street that you could then traverse.
I will tell you, even with this small list, it gets very wily in some neighborhoods where there is literally only one place you can go. That kind of northeast quadrant bordered by Pinewood and Columbia, due to the nature of the roads that come out of that main neighborhood, nothing exits onto Waverly other than school. Nothing exits onto Carroll K other than school. The only way out of the interior of that neighborhood, because it T intersections with other roads, is to go down Rainbow. Rainbow is the only way out once you get going. So some of these things are going to happen. I don't know how closely we're going to be all over people about that issue, but that's just the wordsmithing of trying to pull this off the way that it was kind of communicated by the council.
So basically, we did the best we could. So it's not perfect, but if you want to make any changes to any of those, this would be the time to discuss it tonight, since we obviously can't pass it anyway. So with that, are there any questions or comments from the council?
Thanks, Greg, for all your work on that.
Well, it was something. So again, a lot of these elements, the no driving on the highway, things like that, that's required by state statute. There's nothing we can do to waive that. They permit crossings, they do not permit you driving down the highways.
So technically, we wouldn't have to include it, but just in case someone's looking at this and they think this is the end all be all, we don't want them to think they can, because it's not on the list, because they're not necessarily reviewing state law.
I'll just note, we can handle it on enforcement. I think at some point Main Street comes back off of the highway. I think our officers will know not to go pull people over if they're riding their golf cart over there. So it's just one of those things. I'm like, I'm gonna get too technical if I start getting, except for the portion of Main Street that's not in between.
800 block
Yeah, it's, I think we would get overboard and we'd probably just confuse people. I think this is probably the most simplistic. Again, I think the point is, in the way it's drafted, is to make sure the roads that the council felt were appropriate, not to have essentially vehicles that can't keep up with the pace of traffic, like we can with ATVs and UTVs for the most part, that they're not generally driving halfway across the city on those roadways.
And, this isn't a public hearing, so we aren't required to have public comment on this, but this did originate from a citizen request, so I would ask if anyone from the public wishes to speak on this item to come forward at this time. I saw you waving back there.
Yeah.
So please come to the podium and state your name and your address for the record, please, and welcome.
My name is Jacqueline Noxon, 1265 North 6 is my mailing address. If you're gonna make that many restrictions, it doesn't make sense at all. You can't go on this street, can't go on this street, can't go on this street, so it doesn't make sense at all.
Okay.
So it was a waste of my time coming forward, and it's a waste of you guys' time.
Anyone else from the public wish to comment on this item? If not, then I'll return to the council for any further discussion or comment, questions or comments.
So raises the issue if this doesn't make sense now, to consider not allowing it any further.
We can scrap it, we don't have to move forward with it.
No.
No, I mean
This
just
is great.
restricting use it anywhere in town. If restricting them to keep them off main roads doesn't make sense, then does not having them any further make further sense? I guess that would be a question.
Can you say that one more time?
If with the restrictions that we have with this drafted ordinance, apparently is nonsensical, it doesn't make sense to change, or people aren't able to follow this, I guess, then at what point do we consider just not allowing it throughout the city limits at this point?
Which is,
Is this relating to the comment that was made?
Right.
This isn't what you're saying.
No, this isn't what I'm saying, but I'm just saying with that in
If-
consideration,
Kind of an if-then.
if our attempt to make it better, I mean, at what point do we get to where it's just like it's becoming too much of a nuisance in itself and be done with it?
You obviously council can do it, whatever you want. We have this ordinance in front of you to consider. If you want to amend this to something else, we can sure have a draft done. If you want to not move forward with this ordinance and just leave it the way it is, or if you wanted to have an ordinance that basically doesn't allow it anywhere. I said I'm not as I mean, you're a golfer. How many people have golf carts that actually go to the golf course, I guess?
I mean, I only see a few that go by my house.
Right.
But I
And
think-
North Street's supposed to be the crossing
Right.
of the highway, so if they do go, they should go.
They will go right past my house.
Okay.
I only see a few. The thing I like about this, before we allowed golf carts, like only coming up Fifth Street and then going on North Avenue and then up 8th Street. The thing I do like about this is it does allow more movement legally, even to get you to that point, if that's where you're going. But it also allows you just to drive down town in a safe way. But I originally voted against it, so.
Well, Seward's tricky, and there are other communities. Like I have a friend in Wilbur, and their main street's also a highway, and they have same restrictions, obviously, because it's a state law, and it comes down to enforcement. I mean, sometimes it's a wink, and it's like, okay, we're not gonna, as long as there isn't a close call, we're not gonna get too, or no reckless, we're not gonna get too excited about it. But with Seward, by having 15 and 34 as your two intersections in town, I mean, you really have a hard time going south of town without being on a highway. I mean, maybe it can be done, but you're going cross country to get to Walmart, if you can. I'm not even sure if that's even possible.
Right.
I haven't mapped it, but, so that is part of the challenge, just in general with the way Seward's laid out. But, I mean, I don't personally care how you wanna proceed. We just need direction if you want something else drafted, or if you wanna just let it die, or if you wanna, what it is you want us to do, 'cause it's up to you guys.
I think this is perfect, actually, from how it was written before, cause I too voted against it previously, cause I like to drive my golf cart around town, cause I'm not a golfer. So then I didn't have to be worried about a $500 fine if I was caught leaving my house and driving to my parents' place. To where I can still get to the ball fields from my house. Yes, I cross the highway, but I quickly cross it on a side street, that there's then a side street that I can get onto that allows me to go to the destination that I need. So just because I'm not driving down Pinewood or Hillcrest, I can still get there. So I think this is way better drafted than what it was before, because before it wasn't allowing you to do anything. So, that's just my 2 cents.
And again, to reiterate for anybody that didn't check in on the minutes or watch the video or wasn't here, the purpose of having the exceptions, not allowing through traffic on, in golf carts and low-speed vehicles on Columbia and Pinewood and stuff is, we get into that morning commute, and we don't wanna back up traffic all the way down Columbia because somebody's going 10 miles an hour in a golf cart, taking their kid to school, and everybody's behind them because traffic's coming right at them from the other direction, and the CDC and St. John's and everything else. And so that was the impetus for the council requesting that, before you consider it, that you would like to see at least those main thoroughfares. Waverly's probably got a speed issue in regards to how fast you can drive on it, so you wouldn't want it on there, which is also a state statutory requirement. So,
And I think the addition of the flag helps the safety issue too.
I think if you're gonna have an ordinance for golf carts, this is I agree with Alyssa, it's probably as good as you're gonna get from the safety aspect, but still allowing them.
So where do we go from there?
Great question.
Introduce it? But
Well,
we can't,
We
'cause-
can introduce
You,
it.
well, here's, just procedurally, just so we're somewhat efficient here. You can introduce this ordinance and I can do the first reading. The only challenge is that when we have additional members here, if somebody wants to, amend it later, it gets a little trickier. But, if you're comfortable with as it is and don't wish to amend it anyway, then yes, I would recommend introducing it, doing the first reading, and we'll proceed. But it can get a little wonky if later we have more members that wanna do something different. Is that, I don't know how else we
Is
can
that
describe
because
it.
it's amending it?
Well, cause we'll have the first, I assume the readings have to be the same ordinance.
I believe it, you can default to Kelly, but I believe we can amend it.
And you do a second reading that's different from the first reading? Okay,
Cause it's no different from the process that we can undertake at the first reading tonight. We could amend it tonight again, so,
right, and then you do the first reading.
yep, and then you can read it again. Cause we
Right.
don't technically amend the title, which is all you're reading.
No, okay.
So, if we substantially changed
So
the
the-
crux of
okay.
what it was, we're gonna have a, ordinance about golf carts, and now we're gonna have an ordinance about ice fishing. Well, you've changed the whole dichotomy of what you're talking about, and so that probably has knocked us out of any ability to make any future amendments on it before it's ultimately considered.
So
So
if
I'm
you'd
gonna
like to
introduce it.
introduce the ordinance?
Yes.
Okay. Got my paper here. An ordinance to amend the municipal code of the city of Seward, chapter 382, vehicles and traffic, article 11, to regulate the operation of golf carts, low-speed vehicles, all-terrain vehicles, and utility-type vehicles on city streets, to repeal all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict, to provide for an effective date, to provide for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form, and that is the first reading. So with that, we'll move on to the next item. Item number 3, this is consideration of an ordinance to amend City Code 350, taxation, Article 2.1, occupation tax. Item 1, sewer utilities. Greg?
Yes, as part of the budget that was approved at our last meeting, we had reduced the franchise fee or occupation tax, depending on how you define it, that the city charges our utilities specifically for wastewater. The purpose of doing that is putting even more additional wastewater revenue back into that department to help offset the cost of the planned wastewater treatment plant. And so the way, after talking to Nick Wolf, finance director, he recommended leaving it there but turning it to zeros so that if somebody was looking for it later down the line that isn't familiar with what we did, they would know, they could find it and go, oh, you can do a wastewater one, and it's just set at 0 right now, so we could increase it again. Sometimes, if you don't follow those things really particularly, you may, by not seeing that, think, well, there's a reason you can't do a franchise fee since we do it for the other 2 utilities. By leaving it here, that kind of helps signal that, yes, you can do it, but the city is designing it to be 0. So, that's how we drafted it.
And Greg, just for clarification, this is the franchise fee that the city pays to itself, correct? I mean.
Yes,
it
the business
basically would
fund
go
pays
from-
to the city.
From which fund to which fund?
It goes out of the wastewater fund
Into the general?
into the general fund.
And now we're just
And we,
keeping
and,
more money in the wastewater.
yep, we want to maximize our ability to put revenue towards the wastewater treatment plant, recognizing it's probably the biggest capital item we're ever gonna purchase.
That's what I thought.
Any other questions or comments?
I'll introduce the ordinance.
Alright, an ordinance of the city of Seward, Nebraska, amending chapter 350 of the Seward Municipal Code relating to occupation taxes charged for sewer utility operation, repealing all conflicting ordinances and providing an effective date. That is the first reading. We did not pass any ordinances, so we don't need to make the final motion, correct? Alright. Move on to the next item, number 4, approve specifications, plans, and a cost estimate for the Carroll K Boulevard Box Culvert Improvements Project and authorize the city to advertise for bids. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you. I'm going to be city engineer. You have in your packet 3 items, a set of plans, 39 sheets in that set, a set of specifications, and then a cost estimate. This is for a project to rebuild the east end of a box culvert on Carroll K Boulevard. This is just east of the Legion Field. This is draining from north of the elementary school and then down through Plum Creek Park through an armored channel. It's a relatively large watershed. Has been eroding east of Carroll K. There's an immediate drop of several feet. The erosion has actually undermined that structure. The project is to cut off roughly the wing walls and 4 feet of that channel and rebuild it. And so this project has been wending its way through the 1 at 6 plan. And so with this, we, with approval tonight, plan to advertise on the 28th, October 5th and October 12th with a bid date of October 18th. And we plan to issue a notice to proceed, if all gets approved, on the